Hello, I am on page 658. The reformers also realized that there were other costs involved, such as the $29 million loss in real estate taxes that Moses had never mentioned. The land in Battery Park on which Moses was planning to place anchorages and pillars didn't have to be paid for, of course, because the city already owned it. But its worth, in an area in which each square foot of land was worth hundreds of thousands, ran into the millions. On the basis of real cost, Singstad wrote, it is obvious that the bridge would be by far the more costly of the two projects when all of the economic factors which should be included are considered. Add economic factors to the non-economic involved, the destruction of the park and the values it represented, the destruction of the once bustling Syrian quarter at the foot of Washington Street and the neighborhood values it represented, the destruction of the harbor vistas and the old fort, and there was a powerful case to be made for Singstad's tunnel and against Moses's bridge. The reformers did not say they were unalterably opposed to the bridge. Possibly a full-scale impartial study of all factors involved would prove that it was a better solution than the tunnel. But, they said, such a study should be made before a project of such magnitude was embarked upon, and such a study had obviously not yet been made by Moses or by anyone else. The reformers' influence guaranteed that the city's officials and taxpayers would hear their side. In the crusty Singstad, they possessed an ally expert not only in engineering but in PR, and he demonstrated that Moses had no monopoly on misleading drawings. Moses's, to minimize the impact of the bridge, portrayed it from directly overhead. Singstad's, to dramatize that impact to the maximum, portrayed it from ground level. Possibly, judging from some of the angles, from below ground, thus making the structure seem even higher than it was. There was something funny about the perspective, too. Moses wasn't sure exactly what it was, but the best he could do was to rage that the drawings were completely phony. By the time the controversy came before the City Planning Commission, in the first step of the process through which the reformers believed the public will was to be expressed, they had the facts and figures and pictures ready to go. The day before the process began, however, the reformers' morning newspapers informed them that at Moses's request, bills had been introduced in Albany that would rescind the Tunnel Authority's authorization to build the Battery Crossing and transfer that authorization to the Triborough Bridge Authority. Okay. Such bills would, of course, be necessary if the city approved Moses's plans. But by introducing them before the approval had been given, Moses was acting as if it were a mere formality, as if the city had no choice but to give it. And the reformers learned the next day, such was in fact the case. At the Planning Commission hearing, the reformers presented their painstakingly prepared facts and figures, maps, and drawings. The Regional Plan Association said that if a tunnel proved too expensive, the alternative should not be a new bridge that would destroy the harbor and a park, but a rebuilding of the 3 old East River bridges and the construction of a link between them, and between the Belt Parkway to the south and the Triborough Bridge to the north, along the lines of a future Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. A solution, which the RPA pointed out, would detour traffic around Manhattan instead of pouring more into it in its most congested area. The RPA had prepared preliminary plans and cost estimates for its proposal, but the commission did not make even a pretense of giving them serious study. 2 weeks later, by a 4-2 vote, it approved the Brooklyn Battery Bridge. The 2 dissenting commissioners said that the bridge would destroy values that the city would never be able to replace. The majority opinion did not disagree. The harbor would undoubtedly be altered by the bridge, it said. Oh, hello, if you're coming. The park would undoubtedly be damaged. There are valid objections to a bridge. In fact, they too favored a tunnel. But majority pointed out, the commission is not at this time called upon to choose between a tunnel and a bridge. No one was offering to finance the tunnel. Someone was offering to finance a bridge. A Brooklyn Battery crossing was urgently, desperately needed. If the only type of crossing available was a bridge it would have to be. One of the commissioners who voted for the bridge, Lawrence M. Orton, a former RPA member himself, would spell it out even more plainly to the author years later. The city didn't have the money for a crossing. Neither did the tunnel authority. Only one person had the money, Moses. And Moses wasn't giving us a choice. He just wasn't building a tunnel. It was the bridge or nothing. Take it or leave it. We didn't have a choice. 3 dots. So the vibe shift. In Albany, meanwhile, Moses's bills, sponsored in the assembly by Robert J. Cruz, brother of Triborough insurance co-broker John R. Cruz, and backed by Assembly Minority Leader Erwin Steingut, parentheses, quote, Erwin considered Moses a practical fellow, and by the Republican leadership of both houses, the bills were eating up the legislative track, ordinarily so slow, like thoroughbreds among a pack of percherons. And I'm assuming that percherons are a slow racehorse, because I don't know. Passed by the assembly one afternoon, they were rushed that same afternoon to a Senate committee and were released that same afternoon to the floor of the Senate for a vote. One upstate senator innocently requested time to consider the measures. He was handed a message asking him to take an urgent phone call. When he returned to the floor, he dropped the request. But back in New York, Stanley Isaacs, studying the bills in his quiet way, noticed a point that everyone else had apparently overlooked. There was no home rule message from the city council attached to them as the law required. And the arena in which the Battery Crossing fight was being staged was thereupon switched from the state capitol to the council chamber on the second floor of City Hall. What? There was no home rule message from the city council? I don't know what that is. I'm just going to keep reading. In this arena, okay, so it's happening in City Hall now. Okay. In this arena, the reformers had hope of success. 3 councilmen were, after all, reformers themselves, nominees of the Fusion Party. 5 were members of the American Labor Party. The organized labor favored a tunnel because it would furnish 2,600,000 man-hours of work against 600,000 for a bridge. And all 26 councilmen were susceptible to pressure from civil service organizations, angry as always at Moses because of his refusal to use civil service engineers on his authority jobs. He had recently stated it cost twice as much to do so. Who wanted the more compliant tunnel authority to build the crossing. Isaacs had, moreover, noticed in the bills a buried clause everyone else had overlooked, a clause specifically prohibiting Triborough from paying for the $11 million West Side Highway link. Surely, the reformers felt, now that this had been pointed out to the councilmen, they would not ask the legislature to approve the measures and thereby obliterate the city, recently obliterated to a $16 million expenditure it could not afford for one Moses project, to spend $11 million more. The reformers were also encouraged by the attitude of the mayor, whose reaction to Isaac's discovery of the buried clause was foot-stamping fury. Moses had won his support for the bridge by promising him in so many words that it would cost the city nothing. Knowing how Moses worked, the mayor was sure that the clause was not in the bills by accident, but was rather an attempt by Moses to sneak out of his promise and cost the city $11 million. A faint ray of hope was, moreover, beginning to appear on LaGuardia's horizon from the direction of Washington. Sentiment was building up in Congress for increased appropriations to the PWA. If the mayor could grab off a $30 million piece of that action for a tunnel, the Cooperative Tunnel Authority, instead of arrogant Triborough, could build the crossing. The mayor considered that if big. Sounding out icks, he was informed that $30 million more for New York was absolutely out of the question. But LaGuardia evidently felt that as long as there was any option at all, he should keep it open. He told key legislators privately that he had second thoughts about authorizing Moses to build the crossing. He favored the bill authorizing Triborough to build a crossing, he said, but not the bill stripping such authorization from the Tunnel Authority, because he wanted both bridge and tunnel options kept alive. If PWA money came through, he could have the crossing built by the Tunnel Authority. If not, Triborough could build it. The reformers were all hopeful because their aim was modest. They were not, after all, insisting that the bridge proposal be defeated. They were only asking that it be studied. With three competing plans for a solution to lower Manhattan's traffic problem and wildly conflicting estimates of the cost and effects of each plan, surely an impartial study was needed to determine the true costs and effects before a decision was made. Moses was insisting on the need for haste, they said, but wasn't the need really for delay, a delay which would provide time for mature consideration? The decision the city took on the proposals would vitally affect it for decades, centuries perhaps. Was it not only rational to take a few more weeks or months to make sure the decision was the right one? Finally, the reformers were hopeful because they knew their own strength. United, they felt that they could defeat any politician. In the last citywide election, in fact, their victory had been nearly total. Fusion had taken all three citywide offices: mayor, comptroller, and council president, as well as the presidencies of the two most populous boroughs in 1937. And never had they been more united. 4 years before, the leaders of New York's good government organizations had formed a central committee of civil organizations to support Robert Moses in his fight against Franklin Roosevelt's attempt to oust him from the Triborough chairmanship. Now they formed another central committee, a central committee of organizations opposing the Battery Toll Bridge, to oppose Moses. Within a week after its formation, its chairman, 83-year-old Albert S. Bard, had assigned speakers to address every civic-minded body in the city and every organization concerned with the preservation of beauty and architectural excellence within it. Within a week, a score of such groups had joined the committee. Under the direction of Eric Gugler, a group of the city's most respected architects were visiting and enrolling other architects in the cause. Famous artists who had held aloof from the issue were contacted by artists of equal stature and persuaded that their participation was needed to preserve a beautiful and majestic scene. Bard was making sure that every reformer who had entree to a politician in City Hall, Albany, or Washington was using that entree. A sextet of septuagenarians, for example, spent a week in Washington explaining the situation to New York congressmen. After the most difficult of politicians, Fiorello Henry LaGuardia, Bard left the most respected reformer of them all. Bard left to the most respected reformer of all, the legendary Burlingham, Charles Culp Burlingham, 81 years old, almost deaf, but still the only man from whom LaGuardia would take a scolding. Okay, Charles Culp Burlingham. CC is what they're calling him, I guess. CC hobbled, gaunt and stooped, up the steps of City Hall one morning and was ushered in to see the mayor, as LaGuardia hastily shooed a group out of his office so that the old man would not have to wait a minute. Burlingham emerged to relay to intimates a promise from LaGuardia that, while he would support a home rule message for the bill authorizing Triborough to build a crossing, he would not support or sign one for the bill stripping the tunnel authority of its authorization. The mayor told Burlingham that he would wait until the War Department, which had jurisdiction over all structures built in or across navigable waters and which had scheduled a hearing on the bridge in April, had formally given approval to build it. The approval was only a formality, LaGuardia said, but at least it would give him an excuse to offer Moses for delaying. If, he promised, at any time until the War Department approval was received, money became available for a tunnel, he would see that it, rather than a bridge, was built. And the mayor promptly proved that he meant what he was saying by giving the tunnel authority permission to lobby in Albany against the bill, and by letting key legislators know that the lobbying had his sanction. I need a sip of water. The Central Committee did not neglect the public at large. Unlike the usual run of Moses's opponents, the prestigious reformers had entree both to letters to the editor columns and to editors, who usually heard in person only Moses's side of the controversy. Soon, even the Times was pointing out that a brief delay wouldn't hurt the plan. The bridge, if built, will be there a long time. It is worth taking the time to get it right. The Herald Tribune demanded that Moses make public all the facts about the bridge and, urging the council not to take action until he had done so, and until those facts had been studied, said, "It seems clear now that a major alteration in the city's design and appearance is involved. No conceivable need for hurry has been suggested. The need is therefore for the carefulest consideration and full public discussion, with every opportunity for alternatives to be reviewed impartially and thoroughly. No possible risk should be run of building in haste and repenting for generations to come." With the organized construction trades and the civil service organizations backing a tunnel, and with the letters to the editor showing support of the need for further discussion, it was clear that the tide of public opinion was running against Moses's proposal, to an extent it had never run against him before. Public opinion was the crucial factor in the reformers' philosophy and strategy. Public opinion was a democratic government, the government they believed in. If it was not listened to, government was not democratic. Quote, "A decent respect for public opinion had been a key ground for their demand that Roosevelt A decent respect for public opinion had been a key ground for their demand that Roosevelt back down from his attempt to oust Moses. And they repeated that phrase in demanding that Moses back down now, and in insisting that, if he didn't back down voluntarily, the mayor and councilmen make him. The reformers felt certain that the mayor and councilmen would. They were, after all, politicians, and thus necessarily responsive to public opinion. But all the reformers' hopefulness proved was that they didn't understand how much power over politicians, Moses had been given, or how independent of public opinion he now was. Moses understood. So unconcerned was he about the reformers' efforts that he spent the 3 weeks before the council hearing vacationing in Key West, Florida. And the accuracy of his assessment of the situation was proven when, returning from a day fishing among the Keys, he caught 2 flounders. He received a telephone call informing him of LaGuardia's statement that would delay signing a home rule message on the Tunnel Authority bill, even if the council passed one. Strolling down to the Key West Western Union office, he wrote out a telegram to the mayor, addressed to him at his apartment so that the mayor would receive it that same evening. And then this is the telegram. "No possible way of keeping both projects alive until after War Department hearing. Stop. Therefore, request you sign both messages. Stop. Otherwise, bridge project must be abandoned and Albany notified to this effect." If the mayor did not immediately guarantee that there would be no battery tunnel, Moses was saying, Moses, would never give him the money for a battery bridge. Either guarantee immediately that Moses could build the crossing and build the kind of crossing he wanted, or there wouldn't be any crossing. The telegram was not a request, but an ultimatum, not an appeal from a subordinate to a superior, not a plea from a commissioner appointed by the mayor that the mayor change a decision, but a demand from somebody who had the money to give the mayor something he wanted. LaGuardia understood. After all his stalling, Moses's money was still the only money available. If he wanted the battery crossing, he would still have to do what Moses wanted. The mayor had no more choice than the City Planning Commission had had. Summoning the council leaders to his office, he let them know that his feelings in the matter to be discussed at the upcoming hearing had changed. Okay, that's crazy. So nobody has money except for Robert Moses. That sucks. Robert Moses returned from Florida on the night before the council committee hearing. The Fine Arts Federation of New York, representing 18 leading art societies, had that day issued a statement warning that the bridge would disfigure perhaps the most thrillingly beautiful and world-renowned figure of this great city. A reporter asked Moses about the statement. "The same old tripe," he said. "We'll take care of it all tomorrow." Tomorrow was the city council chamber. City Hall filled a gap in the blank-eyed skyscraper wall with the dignity and grace and elegance of another age. And of all its rooms, its council chamber best evoked the values that the reformers had come to see. What is that sentence? City Council filled a gap in the blank-eyed skyscraper wall with the dignity and grace and elegance of another age. And of all its rooms, its council chamber best evoked the values that the reformers had come to see, were the real issues in the Battle of the Battery Crossing. Respect for the institutions and the law through which, in a democratic society, the will of the people found expression and realization. And that room evoked as well the manner that, in the age which had produced these institutions and laws, and many of those reformers, had been so much more important, the dignity, grace, and elegance in speech as well as appearance, the courtliness, the courtesy, the gentlemanliness. Before its mahogany panels, beneath its delicate wainscoting, the people's elected representatives deliberated under a delicately curving little gallery with an intricately detailed railing at slanting-topped 18th century desks arranged in a semicircle before a presidential dais, I still don't know how to say that word, flanked by flags of city and nation under a ceiling, its details picked out in gold, featuring a huge mural of New York receiving the tribute of the nations. If the setting for the drama was apt, so was the casting. The audience that day was not the typical city council audience. In the memory of participants, there wasn't even a lone housewife present. Not a single clack. Wait, maybe that's a bad word. I don't even know. From a neighborhood civic association to bounce, boos, and hisses, cheers, and the noise of foot stamping off the mahogany paneled walls, and make Jefferson observe. Let me Google and see if that's bad. I don't know. Oh, that's fine. It just okay, a clack is a group of sycophantic followers. Also, I definitely remember looking this up a couple of days ago, so sorry I did not remember. I never know the old-timey slurs, as you know, and so I don't want to accidentally anyway. Okay. Instead, sitting rank on rank in the gallery or on chairs set up to handle the overflow was the very flower of the city's civic leadership, men of wealth and talent devoted to the rule of law and the institutions of democracy that City Hall symbolized. Men who had proved that devotion by spending their talent and their time in a dozen great civic battles. For the audience included not only young reformers, but elderly men whose first hero had been not LaGuardia, but Police Board President Theodore Roosevelt. The Burlinghams and the Seaburys, Schiefelins and McGananys, the men who had formed the heart of the Committee of 107 and the Committee of 1000, who had been fighting for generations against every threat to the institutions which they felt made their city great. There were starched wing collars in that audience, and vests crossed with heavy gold watch chains, and pince-nez and walking sticks, and a spirit of reform that went back half a century and more. If New York had an aristocracy of civic leadership, it was assembled in the council chamber that day, when the long fleet of black limousines screeched up in front of Civic Hall, and the man whom they had once believed to be the living embodiment of their ideals, dressed in a double-breasted dark blue suit that only emphasized his burliness, and with a close-clipped haircut that emphasized the massiveness of his face and his bull neck, impatiently flung open the door of the first of the limousines without waiting for the chauffeur to come around, and, with a full score of aides half running behind him to keep up, stalked into City Hall, pounded up the delicate curve of the hanging staircase, strode past the slender fluted columns of the rotunda, and burst through the chamber door. The opening presentation by Moses's architects and engineers took 2 hours, but, to the reformers' surprise, provided none of the facts for which they had been asking. Aymar Embury described the bridge with the help of a large-scale model. The same large-scale model Embury had already privately all but admitted to the reformers was misleading. Othmar Ammann, noticeably ill at ease, repeated that the bridge would cost $41 million and the tunnel $84 million, but again did not break down the figures so that the reformers could not determine on what, if anything, they were based. Although with Ole Singstad present, Ammann did not this time attempt to maintain that some of the figures came from Singstad. Moses' opponents provided facts in abundance. Stanley Isaacs, directing the opposition presentation, told the councilmen, who goggled over this unprecedented passing up of a chance for personal publicity, didn't he realize that it was only 1 o'clock, the perfect time for a speech to make the late editions of the PMs? That he would not speak himself, but would simply introduce a series of experts who would prove, through specific facts and figures, that on every point of the bridge tunnel controversy, a tunnel would provide greater benefits and cause less harm to the city. Major Henry J. Amy, executive director of the Citizens Budget Commission, analyzed Moses' contention that the bridge and its approaches wouldn't cost the city a nickel, and then simply read the clause of Moses' proposed state legislation that would cost the city $11 million. A battery of municipal finance and real estate experts documented, block by block, building by building, Singstad's conclusion that a bridge would cost the city at least $1,500,000 per year in real estate taxes. Regional Plan Association experts testified that everything Moses hoped to achieve by building a new bridge could be achieved at a small fraction of the construction costs and real estate tax loss by their alternate plan. Isaacs had even commissioned an analysis of Moses' argument, never before analyzed during the decade Moses had been making it, that civil service architects and engineers were less efficient and therefore cost twice as much as the private consultants he employed. The analysis documented that one group did cost twice as much as the other, Moses' group. Even Moses' claim that a bridge would have twice the capacity of a tunnel was disproven by Triborough's own traffic counts for its 2 suspension bridges, which showed that inclement weather and inclemency for a Brooklyn battery, which is frequently heavy would include not only rain, snow and ice, and high winds, but the fog, which is frequently heavy over the lower bay, while not affecting a tunnel's capacity, significantly reduced that of a bridge. As to the relative cost of the 2 types of crossing, Isaac's experts gave the detailed breakdown Moses had not, proving Singstad's claim that a tunnel would cost $65 million and disproving all of Moses' claims. Moses had said that the total cost of the bridge, including approach roads, would be $41 million. RPA engineers found that the cost of the bridge power without approach roads would be $56,625,000. Isaacs had insisted that all the figures used be conservative, but even conservative figures were devastating. When Isaac's parade of witnesses, a parade that lasted more than 4 hours, was over, every Moses contention subject to factual analysis had been utterly demolished. And as for the side of controversy not subject to mathematical analysis, the aesthetic side, the effect of the bridge on the beauty of Battery Park and the New York Harbor, the old reformers felt that the demolition job had been even more devastating. There was a pounding of canes on the council chamber's oaken floor and a chorus of "Hear, hear," out of another age when George McAnany said of Moses' proposal, okay, and then here's a quote, and it's coming from this old reformer guy. What all this would do to the values of the real estate, some of it the most valuable in the world, I leave to others. But that the city would permit its famous battery to be dealt with in such fashion seems to me an incredible thing. I am in fact of the opinion that if the plans under discussion are seriously pressed, there will be an uprising of public opinion, the like of which has not been known since 40 years ago some well-intentioned gentleman in office proposed that City Hall be torn down to make way for something more modern in the skyscraping line. Wrinkled, stooped old McAnany had lost none of his eloquence, and when he finished summing up the reformers' arguments and pointed out to the council that all they were requesting was a study by impartial experts appointed by the council itself to determine the true facts in the case, to study the various alternatives and determine which one would really be for the city, it was difficult for the reformers, wise though they were in the way of politicians, to believe that the request would not be granted. And then, in the 7th hour of the hearing, Robert Moses stood up to speak. Reading from a yellow legal pad on which he had been scribbling furiously during the opposition speeches, he turned his attention first to the analysis of the relative efficiency of civil service architects and private consultants. I want to warn my friends in the civil service that civil service can become a racket, he said. I need a sip of water again. It's getting to be so that nothing will please them but a communist state, which we know is so pleasing to Mr. Isaacs. There was a moment of shocked silence in the council chamber. Then came a storm of boos and hisses, which Moses's lieutenants tried ineffectually to drown out with cheers and applause. But Moses was not to be deterred by boos. He directed his next remarks to the Regional Plan Association proposal. The RPA had always opposed progress, he said. It had sided with the fox hunters and estate owners to oppose the Northern State Parkway, Heckscher State Park, and Jones Beach, and many of his other Long Island projects. In New York City, RPA planners were in a dither about the Henry Hudson Bridge. They asked delay and advocated a low-level bridge. They said that Henry Hudson would ruin the finest spot in Manhattan. We built the bridge. I'm quoting from Robert Moses still. We built the bridge, and a week after it opened, the bankers confessed that they had been wrong. We said it would average 16,000 cars. They said 6,000, and we were right. The RPA has been wrong about all these things, he said. And therefore, why should we suppose that it is right about this one? Its current proposal is, in fact, nonsense. Every argument applicable to the Battery Bridge is applicable tenfold against the Brooklyn Bridge. I think I'm going to stop there. Okay. Yeah, I know. I'm excited for this like Red Scare moment. Yeah. Well, this will be fun to come back to tomorrow. I love the court scene showdown. It's kind of exciting. Yeah. Cool. How much is left in this chapter? This has been kind of fun. I hope that it... Okay, this chapter is... There's like 10 more pages. And then the next chapter is called Chapter 30, Revenge. So I'm excited. Bye.